Good afternoon, students. Today we're going to start talking about rational numbers. Now, most of these things you should remember from last year, but we're going to go ahead and go over the vocabulary and the definitions of our different types of rational numbers. You should have your handout that's green that has space for you to write in your vocabulary words, your definition, and your example. So as long as you have that with you, we should be all set. It's going to look like this. Except you don't have anything written in yet. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start by first talking about, of course, the term natural or counting numbers. Natural and counting numbers are positive whole numbers. So you can think of those as the things that you can count on your hands. You can start with 1 and go all the way to infinity, but that does not include 0 because we can't count 0 on our fingers. The next one, and remember you can pause this video all the way through so that you can have enough time to write down and you don't have to keep up with me, so pause as you need to. The next one we're going to talk about that you need to write in on your paper is whole numbers. Whole numbers include a positive whole number or 0. So this is only going to be the positive side of our number line. So it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. all the way to infinity. Those are considered whole numbers, and it is only the positive whole numbers and 0. Our next word is integers. Integers are the set of whole numbers and their opposites. Last year we talked about in 6th grade 4, the whole number 4, its opposite would be negative 4. So integers are going to include positive whole numbers and negative whole numbers. So you see in parentheses I have a shorter definition for you there, which is all positive and negative whole numbers. Those are called integers. Finally, we have the definition for rational numbers. Rational numbers are all numbers that can be written as a fraction, and the denominator in that fraction can never be 0 in order for it to be a rational number. So for instance, the whole number of 2. Last year we learned that we can write the whole number of 2 as a fraction by putting it over 1. So since we can write that whole number of 2 over 1 as a fraction, that means it is a rational number. Now, something to note here is that repeating and terminating decimals are in fact rational numbers also. So that's something to keep in mind. If a decimal repeats, it's also a rational number. If the decimal ends at a certain point, then that's also a rational number. Now, after hearing these definitions, do you think that a natural or counting number is a rational number? Can we write all positive whole numbers as a fraction? I think we can, so those would probably be considered rational numbers. And whole numbers, can we write all positive whole numbers or 0 over as a fraction? I'm sure we could. Okay, so that would also be considered a rational number. Even integers, if I have negative 2, could I write that as a fraction? Well, yes, negative 2 over 1 is still just negative 2. So that is also, integers are also considered rational numbers. And we'll talk about the relationship between all of these in class tomorrow. Now let's go ahead and continue. We do have a little bit more definitions, and we do have types of decimals. Now this is not something that you have room for in your table. I don't want you writing the definition of these decimals in your table. You can actually write that below the table on your paper there. So we have two types of decimals we're going to talk about. The first one is repeating decimals. Repeating decimals are a decimal whose digits repeat in groups of 1 or more. Last year we saw and used some repeating decimals. When we have a repeating decimal, we use what's called bar notation to represent the repeating digits. We draw a little bar above the numbers that are going to repeat in our decimal. Without that bar, nobody will know that that number is supposed to be repeating, and that's a very important thing. Our second type of decimal is terminating decimals. Terminating, if you think about what the word terminate means, that means to stop or get rid of something. So a terminating decimal is a decimal that does not repeat or go on infinitely. So it's going to have a definite ending. For instance, 1/2 as a decimal is 0.5 or 0.50, and it ends right there. That would be considered a terminating decimal. Most of the decimals that we use are terminating decimals. These two types of decimals, remember, are rational numbers also. So that's something to remember, and you should have both of these written below your table on your notes. Now, Let's talk about irrational numbers. This is the last definition you need to write inside of your table. Okay, the last one inside of the table. An irrational number, hopefully you can imagine, would be a number that cannot be written as a fraction. So in other words, it's all the numbers that are not rational. So if I cannot write a number as a fraction, then it's not going to be considered a rational number. It's going to be an irrational number then. Okay, make sure you have all of these definitions written in. If you need to go back from the beginning of the video and pause again to make sure you have everything, please do that. Your last thing on your homework tonight is a bit of a quiz time. I want you to go ahead and look at each of these numbers. So for each of the number, you're going to decide what name or names to give it. You're going to write each of these numbers in the correct spot or spots on your piece of paper there as an example. So you see on your notes page there's a column at the very end for examples. I want you to look at 3/4 and I want you to tell me, where would 3/4 go? Could I write it in the whole number spot as an example? If not, then you want to not put it there. Maybe it's only a rational number. Maybe it's not an integer, a whole number, or a counting number. So I would probably only write 3/4 in the rational numbers example. Okay, some of these you'll be able to write in more than one spot, and I want you to go ahead and write them in as many spots as you can according to the type of number that they are. Okay, we will go over these in class tomorrow. So make sure you have this done. You should have all 5 of your definition boxes filled in your table. You should have your examples listed. You should also have your decimal definitions below your table in order to have your homework complete. Okay, we'll see you in class tomorrow. Remember, you can go ahead and rewatch and pause the video as many times as you need. Have a great afternoon.